Okay.
Is a picture good?
So this week's parsha, Parsha Tazria, basically the entire theme of the entire parsha is discussing the halachas of tzaras. What's tzaras? In English they translate it as leprosy, but it's not leprosy. It's a specific type of, it's a miraculous type of skin problem that happens to someone who speaks lashon hara and other averos that a person does. Again, the most famous one is lashon hara. That's the concept of tzaras, someone who's a mitzora. And the pasuk goes through again all the different difficulties that this person has to have. He has to be kicked out of the camp. He has to be forced to do tshuva. And again, it's not a physical disease, so because of that, you can go to all the doctors in the world. It's not going to help you. You have to do tshuva and go to the Kohen and do the proper procedure that the Torah tells you, and then you'll be cleared of what's this thing called tzaras. So listen to the medrash. So the medrash in this week's parsha, it says the following. It says like this. Kivan sheshamu Yisrael parshas Negoyim. Once the Jewish people heard from Moshe Rabbeinu, this week's parsha, parshas Negoyim, the story, all the halachas of this ailment, this sickness that Hashem, God forbid, would send to the Jews, Nisyaru, they became filled with fear. They became very, very, very fearful about this. Amrlei Moshe, so Moshe wanted to calm them down. So Moshe said the following thing: Al tisyaru, don't be scared of it. Don't fear tzaras. Eilu lu'umas ha'olam. What you're afraid of, the disease that you're afraid of, that Hashem is going to send to the non-Jews, the worshippers of idols. Aval atem, but you, the Jewish people, lechol v'lishtes l'smayach. Hashem just wants from you to eat, drink, be happy. Hashem just wants you to be happy. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Rab mechayvim l'rasha, that to the Rasha Hashem sends all different pains. V'abetech b'Hashem, but someone who trusts in Hashem, chesed yisavivenu, surrounded by chesed. It's a very strange conversation over here. Tzaras is something given to the Jews, right? Tzaras is a Jewish plague. It's something given to someone, a Jew who speaks lashon hara, who commits averos, and he's given this as a punishment. So the Jews were scared when they heard about this. It's a terrible disease of tzaras. So what's Moshe Rabbeinu saying to them? No, what you're afraid of is going to be sent to the non-Jews, and for you, all Hashem wants you to be eat and drink and be happy. What type of? It's not true. Tzaras is given to the Jews. This parsha said, "Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe," to tell the Jewish people. This is a mitzvah for the Jews. What does it mean? What were they afraid of, and what exactly is Moshe Rabbeinu's tanchumen? What is he consoling them with? That's the problem. Okay, so to understand this a little bit, and to understand again how this relates to Avodas Hashem as we do every week, we have to talk about a little bit about Pesach. Pesach's coming up this week, as actually it's Parshas Chodesh this week, right? After the regular laning of the parsha, we read the parsha of talking about Nisan, how Nisan is the month of Geula, of redemption. So the Geula already starts from now. The Geula starts from now. The whole month of Nisan, we don't say Tachanun, because the whole month is considered like a one long holiday of redemption. So we have to talk about Pesach a little bit. So it's a very peculiar thing that took place before, as sort of like the prelude for Moshe Rabbeinu's, for the redemption of the Jewish people. We all know that Moshe Rabbeinu was a shepherd to his father-in-law outside of Egypt. We know the story, the burning bush and all that. Now Hashem, when He revealed Himself to Moshe Rabbeinu through the burning bush, we know that He spent a number of days arguing with Moshe, trying to convince him to come and to use it, to do the mission that Hashem wants him to do, and to save the Jewish people, to take us out of slavery. Back and forth for a number of days. So the pasuk says that on the last, finally on the last day of the argument, Moshe Rabbeinu said the following thing: Vayan Moshe. Moshe said Vayomer, and he said the following: V'hein lo yaminuli. Hashem, you're telling me to take out the Jewish people from slavery. Fine, I'll go. I didn't want to go in the beginning, but finally you convinced me. Fine, I'll do it. I'll use Aaron as my messenger. I'll do everything you want. But the problem is, hein lo yaminuli. They're not going to believe me. The Jews will just not believe me that I'm taking them out of Egypt. They're not going to listen to my voice. Ki yomru, because they're going to say, Lo yinir elach Hashem, but it's not true. You're just lying. Hashem never appeared to you. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's complaint. So Hashem says, V'yomer elu Hashem. So Hashem said, I'm going to give you 3 signs to prove to the Jewish people that what you're saying is correct. Right? The 3 signs that He would get, 3 miracles that He would perform. Right? The stick that He had in His hand, He would throw to the ground and it would turn into a serpent, and He would take it back up and turn back into a stick. Right? That's number 1. Number 2, He would put His hand into His pocket, take it out, and it would be filled with what? Tzaras. This week's parsha, the skin problem of tzaras, and He would put it back in, and it would miraculously turn back to regular skin. Miracle number 2. Miracle number 3. When He's there, He goes to the Nile, takes out, draws out a cup of water, pours it on the floor, turns to blood. 3 miracles, right? We know the story. Big problem. Very big problem. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that what the Jewish people are not going to believe him. The Jewish people are not going to believe him. How could Moshe Rabbeinu say such a thing about the Jewish people? Hashem already promised Avram Avinu that they're going to be taken out of Egypt. The Jewish people, the Medrash says that every single Shabbos, the Jewish people would chazer over. They didn't have a lot of Torah back then. They would chazer over this one tradition that they had from Avraham Avinu, that they will be redeemed from Egypt. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew this. What does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu is thinking, Hein lo yaminu, they're not going to believe me? What does that mean? How could he possibly think that? And another thing is, okay, these three miracles, what's the significance of these specific miracles that somehow that's going to convince the Jewish people that Moshe Rabbeinu is correct? So what's going on here? So listen to this. Rav Tzadok writes the following thing. And this is mamash for today. You know, the Zohar says that everything that took place for our redemption in Egypt will take place, you know, maybe not in the same exact way, but it's going to take place in our redemption from this galus. All the struggles and the emotional issues that took place during the redemption back then is going to take place now also, over here now. So we have to take this into heart. Listen to this. Rav Tzadok writes the following thing. Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu never thought for a second that the Jewish people would question the fact that they will leave Egypt. They never thought that. He never doubted that. The fact that they'll leave. As the Medrash says, that they believed this with all their heart. This was their tradition. The problem, what Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of was the following. Hashem asked Moshe to say the following message to the Jewish people. That what? The message was that, listen, that I'm going to take you out of Egypt, and when I take you out of Egypt, I'm going to bring you to Har Sinai, and you're going to receive the Torah and to serve Hashem. That was the message. I'm going to take you out of Egypt, and you're going to become the Jewish people, the chosen people. I'm going to give you the Torah. So Rav Tzadok writes, Moshe Rabbeinu of course knew that the Jewish people were going to believe that they were going to get out of Egypt. That's for sure. But this was the thing that he was afraid about. They knew that they have free will. They knew their own sins. They knew what they've been doing. And they knew how low they were. They knew how terrible, how low a level of service Hashem they were in. They knew how much averis they were committing. They were so completely submerged in the tumah, in the impurity of Egypt, that there was almost no way to recognize the difference between a Jew and an Egyptian back then. You know, listen to the Medrash. The Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu actually went to the Jewish people, it's a Medrash in Shir HaShirim. Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu actually went to the Jewish people to tell the message that he's going to take them out of Egypt, listen to what they said. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Jewish people and said, that in this month you're going to be redeemed, what did they say? They didn't start dancing and happy and all that. Amrullah, they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, heich anu negolim, how could we possibly be redeemed? The whole Mitzrayim, the tunefes me'avodah shalanu, all of Egypt is sullied with our idols. You go to every idol shop made by the Jews, and the entire Egypt is flooded with our idols, and you're telling us we're going to be redeemed? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of. Of course the Jewish people knew that they were promised to be redeemed, but it was that aspect that we're going to be taken out and turned into holy people? That's impossible. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, Hein lo yaminu, they're not going to believe me. He says, Al kain lo rotzu lahamin, they were not able to believe, sheyalu l'madrega gedola kamatan Torah, they couldn't possibly fathom that they could go from a level of where it's impossible to see the difference between them and an Egyptian to people that could receive the Torah. It was impossible. Hein lo yaminu, they're not going to believe him. They're not going to believe me. And if that part of my message is clearly not true, then the whole thing is made up. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of, and it's taka true. When Moshe Rabbeinu came, that's what they were afraid of. It can't be. We can't be the same people that Hashem promised our forefathers to take us out, because we messed it up already. We committed so many sins. You know, listen, there's free will in the world, right? If there's free will, Hashem promised to take us out and to make us His people, but you know what? We probably messed it up already because of all the things that we've been doing. It's impossible, you know. And even when the time of Kriyas Yamsuf, even when we were actually being taken out, and the sea was about to split, the Medrash says that in Shemayim, before Hashem split the sea, there was a tremendous argument in heaven. The Satan came to Hashem and said, "You're going to split the ocean for these people?" The Satan said, "Elu oivdei avodah zara, ve'elu oivdei avodah zara." The Egyptians serve idols and the Jews serve idols. Ma hevdu bein elu elu. What's the difference between these two people? Why are you saving them and killing them? And that's exactly what the Jewish people were bothered by. And Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned about this. Hein lo'im, they're not going to believe me. So what's the response? So what's the Eitzah? What's the Tanchumin? What's the consolation? What's Hashem? What's the message? So Hashem said, give them 3 miracles. What does that mean? So listen. Listen to what Tzaddik says. Al zeh hir lehem gimel isis. This is what the three miracles that Hashem sent with Moshe Rabbeinu was to tell them. A little bit of an intro. The pasuk says that when Moshe, before Hashem told him these three miracles, what was the first message to tell the Jewish people? So v'yomer Elokim el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Koi Saimer al Bnei Yisrael. This is what you should tell the Jewish people. You're afraid. What are you afraid of again? You're afraid of them not believing in themselves, not believing in their own ability to schlep themselves out of the garbage. This is what you tell them. Hashem Elokei Avosechem. Hashem, the God of their forefathers. Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Shalchani Aleichem. The same. I'm the God of your forefathers, of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I'm sending Moshe Rabbeinu to take you out. Zeh Shmi La'olam. That's my name forever. V'zeh Zichri L'dar Dar. In every generation, that's how you remember me. What does that mean? So listen to what Rav Tzaddik says. Rav Tzaddik writes the following thing. V'al zeh hir l'magiloi. Says this is what he was telling him. L'hayr Islam, he was telling the following thing. Ki einam doim l'mitzrayim. Even if on the outside, based on what you do, based on your daily schedule, you look like an Egyptian and you act like an Egyptian, you're not an Egyptian. Shehei mekayram v'sharshim v'tumah. The Egyptians are rooted in impurity. They come from impurity. Their ancestors are impure, and their everything, their future is impure. Avul Yisrael Mekoychem Baruch. But the Jewish people, their root is holy. Their root is blessed. Umachzav Sem Mizera Kodesh. They're yud from a holy seed, from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Rak'eis Atem Mishukam Yishalom. Right now, you're just not living up to it. Right now, you're not acting like the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but that doesn't change who you are. Who are you? I'm the God of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I'm your God too. You're the descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that cannot change. Maybe you could, as far as you could run from it, as far as you try to disguise it, as far you could try as much as you can to forget it. The reality is there. It cannot be changed. The genetics cannot change. And all it takes is for Hashem to reveal His holiness. All it needs is Hashem to reawaken that spark that's in a descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's just natural for you to return back to your source. Everything, the nature of all existence is to return to their sources. That's the nature of all things. The body is the source of the body is dirt. It returns to the dirt. The source, everything in nature returns to its source. It's only natural for a Jew to return to his source, and everything in between that's chaotic, and everything that in between that makes us look like a non-Jew, it's temporary. It's completely temporary, and it's not true to who we are. So the Jewish people were afraid. They're not going. How could it be that we could go from people that are flooding the streets of Egypt with idols to people that are serving God on Har Sinai? And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, you know what? It's very strange. You're right. You're right. It's very strange that you could act this way, but eventually you'll be holy Jews. But the reason why it could happen is because you come from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that cannot change. It cannot change. There's no way out of that. There's no way out of that. All problems that are to the Jewish people, all spiritual blemishes are skin deep. It cannot affect who we are. That's not who we are. It's purely skin deep. Only skin deep. So what are the three miracles? The Rebbe Tzaddik goes on to explain that these three miracles were coming to tell the Jewish people this thing. The Medrash says, the Mishnah says, in Pirkei Avos, that there are three basic character traits, three not good character traits, which in the words of the Mishnah says, "Motziin es ha'adam min ha'olam." Take a person out of this world. Make a person fall in all types of problems. Kina va'ataiva va'akavod. Motziin es ha'adam min ha'olam. The three things: kina, which is jealousy, which comes from hatred. Jealousy. It's that character trait. Taiva. We all know what taiva is. Va'akavod and gaiva, haughtiness. Needing to be honored by people. These are the three major character traits which destroy a person spiritually. So Rav Tzaddik goes on to explain that these three miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu performed for the Jewish people were telling them that right now you might look like Egyptians and you might have all the problems of Egyptians with kinna and taiva and kavod, all the worst problems in the world. But they're not. But they're only skin deep. They're not really part of your genetics. Based on your genetics, you're holy people. Listen to this. So he showed them these three signs, to tell them this following point, that you are different. You are different. You might not look the same. You might look the same, but you're 100% different. I'll tell you something. The Leshem was one of the great. Rebbe Eliash's grandfather was known as the Leshem, an incredible mekubal in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, when he first traveled, when he first moved to Israel, the Ben Ish Chai, when he heard about him coming, he said, "Ari bami mizrach," that there's a lion coming from the east. He was from the west. I'm sorry. He was a big makubal. He writes the following thing: that the truth is, according the way the world should be, that we should physically, with our own physical eyes, see a physical difference between a Jew and a guy. He said the way the world should be is that a Jew looks like a human being like we have, and a non-Jew should look like a nachash. That's what he writes. Because of the sin of Adam Rishon, before this, the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the mixture of good and evil became so great that you can't even see a physical difference between a Jew and a guy. But we're different bodies. It's a different genetic pool. It's completely different. The Chasam Sofer actually writes. He writes this in one of his sermons. The Chasam Sofer says that he doesn't understand how we could rely on medicine to heal Jews that are just tested on non-Jews. He says it doesn't make any sense. The body of a non-Jew is different. And the fact that we could just assume that medication works on a Jewish body just because it works on a non-Jew, he doesn't get. It's not the same. It's not the same. So this is what the three miracles were coming to show. He says like this: Ki shorish klibas mitzrayim hataiva. We know, let's say, there's such a problem. Again, one of the three main problems, one of the three main averos that take a person out of this world are taiva based. Things based on lust. Misidr to Nachash, that's represented by a snake. Right? This Nachash in the story of Gan Eden, created a situation where the tree of knowledge of good and evil looked enticing to Adam and Chava, right? So Taiva is represented by a snake. This is what the first miracle was. You are not the same as the Egyptians. Because your flesh is like the staff of Hashem. That staff, which Hashem performed miracles through, that's representing the Jewish people. Right now, now it looks like a serpent. Once it's thrown from Moshe Rabbeinu's hands, it turns into a serpent. It looks like a serpent right now. But in 1 second, just holding it back and just getting control of yourself, it could immediately go back to the way it was. The non-Jews, Mitzrayim, they are genetically snakes. They're genetically predisposed to Taiva, to the Yetzer Hara. And there's no way for them to turn into a staff of Hashem without conversion. But a Jew, by the very fact that he's a descendant of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, is different. And he's a staff of Hashem. Right now, he's acting like a snake. But in 1 second, Moshe Rabbeinu grabs back onto that tail, it turns right back into a snake. That's number one. That it turns right back into a staff. That's the first miracle. That to show the Jewish people that the problem of Taiva is skin deep. It's not real. It's not truly who you are. Next. Klibas Akina. The second problem that's within human nature that takes a person out of this world is hatred, kina, jealousy, animosity to another human being. Gamkin Hoym Mitzrayim. That was also a problem with the Egyptians, and the Jews were suffering from that. But the second miracle was to show V'alzeh hir lehem yado, and this was the miracle of Tzaras. Where does Tzaras come from? From a person who speaks Lashon Hara. Where does Lashon Hara come from? When you're jealous, when you hate your neighbor, you don't speak nicely about him, right? So what was the miracle? The same thing. Moshe Rabbeinu sticks his hand into his pocket, pulls it out, and it's full of Tzaras. Meaning that you could have a Jew who's completely leprous, completely saturated with Tzaras, seemingly completely submerged in the septic tank of kina, in the terrible, terrible toilet of kina, of jealousy. But what happens? All he has to do is stick his hand right back in, and it goes right back to the way it was, because it's not real. It's not who you really are. He says, this is the second miracle of Tzaras. Tzaras ba'idei Lashon Hara. Tzaras comes for Lashon Hara. Sheba miklipazu, which comes from this problem. V'akol ramizanal. It's all for this point. The third. What's the third? The third problem that takes a person out of this world is kavod. The need to be praised, the need to be, haughtiness, things like that. In Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim were known for their gaiva, for their haughtiness. Why? Because of their great understanding, for their chachma, for their knowledge. So Tzaddik writes, Mayim roim is the chachma satar. Water represents wisdom. Water always represents wisdom. Water represents Torah. So on the other side, water represents the knowledge of the nations of the world. And the same thing. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people. Right now, you seem to be all enthralled with the secular wisdom that you seem to be as the same as the Egyptians that are enthralled with it. You know what? Spill it on the floor, it's blood. It's nothing. It's not who you are. That's not really what you're destined for. What are you destined for? True water. What's the true water? The waters of Torah. That's what you're truly destined for. Right now, you're infatuated with this water that you see in front of your eyes, but the truth is, it's blood. It's not real water. The real water that you naturally need, that you really are craving, that really is going to be, going to give you a sense of purpose and a sense of direction and a sense of worth. It's going to be the waters of the Torah. Ki Yisrael ein lem chelik v'shayches b'chachmas Mitzrayim. The Jewish people don't naturally have any real connection to the wisdom of the nations of the world. The chachmasim tisbatel, the wisdom of the nations will eventually be proven insignificant compared to the Jewish people. The Yisrael yizku l'chachmas haTorah b'matan Torah. The Jewish people will be worthy of receiving the true wisdom, which is the Torah itself. This was holding back the Jewish people from redemption. The lack of understanding of who they truly were. Listen, when Moshe Rabbeinu even came to Egypt to take the Jewish people out, and he came to Paro and he said his whole thing, right? And Paro said, the whole thing is a lie. I don't believe any of it. So Paro was concerned about something. He saw when Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Jewish people and told them this message, the Jewish people were filled with chizuk. They were filled with true happiness, right? That's what the pasuk says. That after Moshe Rabbeinu came and told them this thing, they were very, very happy. So Paro was terribly afraid of that. Because once his slaves are all excited about getting out of there, they're not going to be slaves too much longer. So what did Paro do? So Paro said to the world, Tichbar es ha'avoda. Add the load on. Make them work even harder. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? So the Ramchal writes in Mesil Sisharm, it's a very simple thing. Just make them not think about it anymore. Just make them be so stressed with the little stupid things of getting wheat, whatever, like the little narishkeit compared to what the truth that just got revealed to them. Let them just not have so much insignificant work on their shoulders that they'll just not think about it anymore. You know how to keep a Jew in slavery? You know how to keep a Jew not fulfilling his potential? Let him just pile on the stupidity. Just pile on the waste of times, and he just won't have the time to think about it. Because once a Jew realizes who he really is, once a Jew realizes that, I'm not John Smith on the street. I'm a different species. A different species. A new species called a descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Once a Jew realizes that, then that's the beginning of the end for the non-Jewish world. That's the beginning of the end. That's the Jews' ticket out. That's our way out. The only way how we could get out of Egypt, the only way how we could get out of our own individual problems is to recognize and to remember who we are. That's it. That's the only way out. There's a story they say from the Baal Tanya. The Baal Tanya was once on a mission with two other great Hasidic masters, two colleagues of his, to collect money for a certain widow. There was a certain widow that had, again, whatever it is, had some financial problems. They were collecting money for her in a certain town. So they, it was difficult times in the town. So they were, going from house to house collecting. It wasn't, they weren't really accomplishing much. So they heard that there was one rich Jew. There's one rich Jew in the town that he would, easily be able to support this widow and take care of all her financial problems. The problem is this guy is a terrible miser. He's known to be an exceedingly cheap guy, and there's no way you're going to get any money from him. So the two colleagues of his said, okay, fine, listen, it's not even worth trying. If everybody's telling us that they go to him constantly and he keeps on turning them down, it's not worth our effort. So Baal Tanya said, listen, I want to give it a shot. But I want you to just let me do the talking. Let me be in charge of this. Okay, fine. So they knock on the door. He opens the door. He's still a religious Jew. He sees these three rabbis. Opens the door, and the Baal Tanya's talking. The Baal Tanya really pours his heart out. Trying to describe in all emotional detail the situation of this widow, trying to pull on his heartstrings, and telling him, and we need $1,000. No, it's really terrible, and it's only $1,000, but we need $1,000. So the guy's like, you know what? That story really touched me. I really feel that this woman must be very desperate, and it's very, very sad. Let me see what I can do. So he goes into his other room, into his, office, whatever, comes back out, and has a penny. And he says, here, take the penny. The guy's not, he's making fun, whatever. So what does Baal Tanya do? So Baal Tanya says, wow, this was mamish, the biggest mitzvah. I can't even imagine how much Mesiras Nefesh is. This is mamish a gavaldige thing. Unbelievable. He gave a penny for tzedakah. It's an unbelievable thing. Thank you so much. They leave the door. So the two colleagues are looking at him. What are you doing? It's a penny. This guy, it's a chutzpah. We should put him in excommunication for what he did. It's terrible. He just did a tremendous avera. Baal Tanya said, just quiet. Trust me. So they walk down. They step down from his house. All of a sudden, they turn around and he's chasing after them. He says, you know what? Here's $1. Fine. Okay. Wow, a tremendous mitzvah. I can't believe you just did that. You came after us. Unbelievable. Fine, are you ready to get the story? Well, so they turn around, they go a little bit further, down the block. He chases after them. Yeah, here's $100. Yeah, and kacha goes on like this until they have all the money. Fine, unbelievable thing. So the two colleagues asked Baltanya, "How do you know? How do you know that this was going to happen?" So Baltanya said, "Listen to me. The pasuk says about the Jewish people that it's Am Nedive Amim, that the Jewish people are the most giving of all peoples. We're the most giving. Am Elokei Avram, the descendants of Avram Avinu, we're the most giving of people. So this guy, he has a Yetzar, he has a problem that he's very much attached to his money. He has a problem. So what happens every time he gives amount of money that people think is beneath him? You know, he gives a little, $1 to stock when people think he should give 100. What happens? People yell at him, right? People yell at him and tell him you're terrible. What are you? You're a miser. You're not. That's not a Jewish mentality. I don't want to have anything to do with you. They're just reinforcing that Yetzer Hara. That's what people are constantly doing with this guy. And all they're doing, instead of trying to bring out the natural inclination of giving that's in this guy's heart deep down, they reinforce. They just keep on reinforcing the Yetzer Hara by giving it credence. Right? By talking about it, by saying that this guy has such a big Yetzer Hara, it makes the Yetzer Hara think that it's big. You know what I mean? It keeps on reinforcing the problems. All I had to do was say the truth, which is that giving a penny for this guy was taka a big thing. It was true. And you know what? And giving a penny for tzedakah is a big mitzvah. That's all I had to do. And all I had to do was just not block, and then just naturally the giving, the natural inclination of a Jew is going to come out. That's all I had to do. That's what Geula comes from. Geula means redemption. Means the only way for redemption is the only way redemption is possible is if Jews start believing that we can get out of this. And the only way for us to believe that we can get out of all the tsaras that we're in is to believe that we're the same people as the previous generations. There's no difference. There's no difference at all. We constantly hear stories about previous generations, and we're told about our ancestors are so holy, they daven to Hashem. We shouldn't think that we're any different than them. We're no different. It's the same blood that runs through their veins, runs through ours. It's the same. The same people in Egypt that were on the 49th level of impurity, that you weren't able to see a difference between him and his Egyptian neighbor, were able 49 days later to receive the Torah. All the more so we can get out of this. All the more so. So the Jewish people hear the parsha of Tzaras. This week's parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them that if a Jew speaks Lashon Hara, you're going to get hidden with terrible ailments, terrible illnesses, terrible problems, terrible makas. And you know what happens? The Jewish people are reminded of the 10 plagues that they once saw that happened to the Egyptians. And they were terribly afraid. Like the Medrash says, they were afraid when they heard the parsha, because what did they think? Now we're back to what the Egyptians were. When the Egyptians were not acting properly, when they were terrible people, so what did Hashem do? He gave them 10 plagues. So what's Hashem doing now? Same thing. We're not going to keep the mitzvahs. We're going to speak Lashon Hara. Hashem's going to send us plagues too. We're no different anymore. We're going back to the step one. So when they heard about the parasha of Negoyim, the Nisyaru, they became afraid. So what's Moshe Rabbeinu's response? What you're afraid of, the type of plague that you're afraid of, the 10 plagues, that's l'umas ha'olam. That's to the nations of the world. Their plagues, their illnesses that Hashem sends them when they're not behaving properly, it's coming from within. It's coming from, their problems are not just skin deep. Their problems go all the way down to the root. So the plagues that Hashem sends them are terrible, devastating plagues, like He sent to Egypt. But you, the Jewish people, the type of illness that Hashem is sending you is literally a skin disease. To tell you that what? That it's not true. This Jew, you're not living up to your standard. You're speaking Lashon Hara, you're not living up to who you can be. So I'm going to send you a disease to tell you that. A skin problem. To tell you that you have a problem. But just know it's only skin deep. It's literally only skin deep. It's not through and through. It's not really who you are. And the way out of it is just to do tshuva. Just do tshuva. You don't have to, convert. You don't have to become reborn or something. Just do tshuva. Just stop what you're doing, and you'll automatically go back to the way you were. The problem was skin deep. What does Hashem want for the Jews? Eat, drink, and be happy. That's what Hashem wants. Hashem doesn't want to hurt Jewish people. He doesn't want to, kill us and all that stuff. Hashem wants us to be good. Hashem wants us to be happy. The problem is we're not living up to it. We're not acting the way Jews should act. So Hashem sends us a reminder called Tzaras. He sends us a reminder just to remind us that what? That we're just not acting the way we should. Not that we're not who we are. Not that we're not inherently capable of becoming proper Jews. We're just not living up to it. So this is the chizuk we have to take. This parsha is full of problems. It's full of tzaras. It's full of illnesses. But the same word nega, the same word which nega, which means a plague, and when Hashem inflicts someone with an illness, if you flip around the words, if you take it the right way and you look into a deep way, the same word nega, if you flip the letters, it spells the word oneg. which is delight, which is pleasure, pleasantness. Why? Because if you take the message in the right way, what Hashem is telling you is that if you act properly, all you'll have is pleasant things. That's what Hashem is telling the Jewish people. All your problems are just skin deep. All you have to do is just stop acting that way. That's all. Just fix your actions. You don't have to, make an overhaul of who you are, and then everything will go back to the way it should be. Let me tell you on my side. I think I've mentioned this story before, but it's like anything else in Torah. Chazar is always good. Story goes like this. I'll keep it short because I'm pretty sure I did say this once. The story goes that the Barditchever, it was one time the Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. So he was a great lover of the Jewish people, really a good lawyer for us. So the story goes that one Kol Nidre night, one time night of Yom Kippur, there, the whole neighborhood's from and everything. Everybody's at shul, waiting to start. And the Barditchever, instead of going, they use the Rav, instead of going to his seat in the front of the shul, telling the Chazan to start, he's pacing back and forth. There's something going on. There's some problem, and he's having a conversation with Hashem. He's openly talking, and so he goes on, and he's having a thing like, Hashem, how could you do this to us? It seemed that there was a decree. There was something hanging over the Jewish people's heads. There was some problem, and he was trying to fix it. So he's saying that, Hashem, please, don't send this problem to the Jewish people. We love you. We're good. Don't do this. He's davening, trying to break it. It's not happening. It's not working. So the Medrash says to himself, you know what? When Yaakov Avinu was about to be attacked by Esav, the Medrash says that he did three things. He prayed to God, he prepared for battle, and he sent presents to Esav. So the Barditchever said, I have to do the same thing. If Hashem's attacking us, so to speak, God forbid, I have to have the same precautions. I prayed to him. It's not going to work. Now I have to go to war. So he started really giving it to Hashem, so to speak, really talking in a harsh way. Hashem, how could you do this? The Jewish people deserve more than this. Your name is so hidden to the world, in a very harsh way. Still nothing. So the last thing that Yaakov Avinu did was to give a present to Esav. So the Barditchever said, I have to find a present. I have to give Hashem a present. So where am I going to find the present now, Yom Kippur night? So he looks around the shul, nothing there. So he says, let me go out to the street. Let me just walk around the streets. Try to, maybe something will hit catch my eye. So he's walking down the streets of Barditchev. Everybody's at shul. The streets are empty. So while he's walking down the streets, he hears from one of the houses a woman that's crying. So he knocks on the door, and he sees this woman. She's a relatively young woman, and she has her, her head covered with a techel, and she's crying. She was clearly just crying. So he says to her, "What's the problem? Why aren't you at shul?" So the woman says, someone like me doesn't belong in shul Yom Kippur night. So they're just like, I can't. I mean, I don't know your story. I don't know what it is that you've done, whatever. But I can't imagine it's been so terrible that you don't deserve to be in shul Yom Kippur night. So do me a favor, tell me what's going on. Like, what's your story? So she said, listen, I don't want to say, but if the Rebbe really pushes, this is the Maisa. Maisa goes that when she was young, her and her brother were orphaned at a very young age, right? And the story goes that she was, obviously didn't have a parnassa, so they were hired as workers in the house of the non-Jewish landowner. So the son of the non-Jewish landowner liked this girl when she was young, and always tried to, talk to her and, confront her and all that stuff. And she, she's a frum girl, obviously always turned him down and everything, even though she knew that it was, all it took was the son to speak to the father and they would be fired and they would have a parnasa. But she always refused. One time when they were out in the field, he was very aggressive and he grabbed her hair. And she pulled away right back. But she said to the Barditchever, there was like half a second that I hesitated. I hesitated for a moment, and then I came to my senses and pulled back. And she she doesn't know anything. She didn't go to yeshiva. She doesn't know anything. And she was convinced that what she did was so terribly wrong by just not pulling back as fast as she could that she's now, she can't get married. She can't have any connection with the community anymore. And she's just completely kicked out. She's the worst Jew to ever live. The fact that she didn't pull back as fast as she could. So the Barditchever was hearing that. And therefore she said, I'm not a Jew like me doesn't deserve to be in shul tonight. So they're just like, I don't have a lot of time to explain this to you, but you really didn't do anything wrong. I mean, yeah, listen, should you pull back as fast as you can? Yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal. You didn't do a terrible avera. You're not, you're allowed to get married. Everything. So she said that after this happened, she was so disgusted with herself and her hair that caused this problem. She shaved off her head, and that's why she's wearing a tichel, not because she's married. She never got married, but she's just disgusted with her hair. So after hearing this, Barditchever said, what did you do with your hair? So she said, I don't know, I just put it in a bag and threw it in my closet. So the Barditchever said, could I could I please borrow that hair for a little bit? So he went, okay, fine. Goes to the closet, takes out the bag of hair, and he says, listen, I'll talk to you after shul. Please come to shul with me. It's not, you didn't do anything terribly wrong. It's fine. You're a good Jew. Fine. So they come to shul. But this Jew takes the bag of hair, throws it on the beam, and says to Hashem, Nu Hashem, that's your present. We're okay? We're good? Okay, fine. Let's start Kol Nidre, and they start davening. You know, everybody knows there's such a thing called Jewish guilt, right? And Jewish guilt has a good source. It's because we do feel guilty about the things that we've done wrong. We all know, the Gemara says that even the worst Jews are filled with charat, they're filled with guilt, like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. We're all filled with guilt. But we have to recognize that, don't make the same mistake this woman did. That don't think that the problems that are causing you guilt and grief go through and through are really who you are. It's skin deep. All the problems that we have, everything that we feel guilty about, all the problems that we've done, all the bad things and all the problems that we have are purely skin deep. And if we remember that in a strong way, if we really remember this, and that's our ticket out, that's how we'll get our own Pesach. That's how we'll get a redemption. And if we so if we're mechazik ourselves with this, there's no question that Hashem will take our guilt as a carbon, as a sacrifice, and with that we'll be able to see the Bias Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'meher v'yameinu. Amen.